Tell you a little secret. There's one bolt that holds this ignition tumbler switch. You can do this with a vehicle. Let's say you lost the key, or you bought a vehicle and there is no key. After you pull the tumbler out, you can turn it. If you hold it the right way, you can turn the ignition on. I think the ignition's on. Yep. The key quit working on this 83 Firebird. The ignition won't turn on. I have the key for it right here, but it seems like it's locked. The key is really worn, and yeah, it's worn down really bad. It's really thin. I don't know why. The car's got 172,000 kilometers. That's only like, what, maybe 100,000 miles, maybe. So I went and got a key cut. Here's another one I got cut, and it's not thin and worn down. It's a new cut key. And it was getting to the point where I had to wiggle it like a few days ago, but now it's to the point where it won't work at all, even with this new cut key. So I've tried matching keys, cut keys, tried wiggling the original key. I can't get it to unlock, so I'm gonna take it apart. So I don't have to use a steering wheel puller because I never pressed the new steering wheel on yet. I had the nut just sitting on the shaft. Once you press the steering wheel off, which I've done in a previous episode, then you have this. There's a faceplate here, and there's a snap ring around the shaft. And the faceplate is spring loaded, so you have to push in on it and get that snap ring off the shaft. This here is a tool, a handy tool, and you can put a wrench on here and tighten it, and it'll press that plate down, and it makes it a little bit easier to get that snap ring off. You could probably do it with get somebody to hold it down. Maybe it's spring loaded and it's pretty heavy pressure, but I can press it in by hand. So the hard part is actually getting that tiny little snap ring off. What a pain in the butt that was. That little snap ring, this tiny little bugger here, let me tell you, it's not easy to get it off. It's split, it has a split ring, or it has a split in it, but wow. Even if you have the compression tool, it's tricky to get that off of there by yourself. So I got her. This should just slide off. This is your locking for your steering. There's a pin that comes through when you turn your key off, and the pin sticks into these little notches, and it locks your steering wheel. So now that I have this off, I could probably turn the steering wheel if I wanted to. And I just put the steering shaft in today, and I do want to turn it to put the bolts in, so that kind of makes it handy, helpful. I believe this only goes on one way. Looks like it has a spline, but I'm gonna keep going. This is a clock spring, I think they call it, for the horn, so you can turn your steering wheel. The horn works on the shaft even if you turn your steering wheel. It has a brass contact plate all the way around, so that just pulls off. And then you have, this is the spring itself for your clock spring that we just, and locking plate that we just pulled off. This spring, I don't think it's in the way. I think it can stay on there. But the signal switch here, it has to come out partially. not all the way, but it has to come out partially. The wires are tricky, but just to take the screws out and move it out of the way is not that hard. And the hazard switch here for your 4-ways, you have to unscrew that. There's a screw in there. I think they're all Phillips. I think these are all number 2 Phillips. This is what it looks like. That's your signal switch. There's a pivot point here, and I think I have to take that screw out, and there's one in behind. If you turn it to the right, there's a screw in behind there, and there's another one down here, and there's another one I think behind this arm here. I'm going to put the signal to the right, and I'll take this top one out first because it's in behind the signal switch a little bit. And I can take it out, and the other screws, all the other ones will hold it, so I can still move this. And then I'll put it back into the neutral position. And from the neutral position you can get everything. There's one in this hazard switch here. One there that has to come out. Don't lose track of any of that. There's one down here. It has to come out. There's the arm. This here takes the arm linkage off. Let's take that one out. And be careful because this little steel plate usually moves afterwards. So you can actually pull that steel plate out. It just slides into this ball here, into the arm. So just keep track of that if you do pull it out. I think you have to. I think you have to pull it out. And then the last one, this doesn't work anymore. The last one is here behind that plate. And then that's it. And then the signal switch will be loose. You have to watch where it comes through the column here, but it'll be loose enough, and the wires will be slack enough that you can pull it out enough to get at one bolt. There's one bolt that holds this ignition tumbler switch, ignition switch tumbler. There's one bolt, and it's behind this signal switch here. So carefully, you might have to press in on the 4-ways. So you might want to disconnect your battery or whatever because your 4-ways might go off. So I don't have any key. You can do this with a vehicle. Let's say you lost the key or you bought a vehicle and there is no key. You can do this. You can take everything apart carefully, put a new tumbler in here. And apparently these tumblers are only 20 bucks on Amazon for a brand new one with a new key. So I haven't ordered it yet, but I'm going to put a new tumbler in here eventually, very soon. I just want to turn the ignition on or take the steering lock off so I can work on it for now. So I'm going to push in on the 4-way switch, and the 4-ways will probably turn on or go off. There we go. And when that switch is in, it's easier to pull this out. Just be careful with the wires, and this is all plastic, like old 35-year-old plastic. So be careful with it. And just wiggle it out a little bit at a time. Oh, there goes the horn. I think that's enough. I'm going to turn off the 4-ways if I'm able to. I don't know. I might not be able to now. Might have to disconnect the battery so the 4-ways don't go too crazy. this button here, if it touches the ground, your horn will go off. So be careful of that. But I think that's enough. 4 ways are going off. But in here, in behind the signal switch here, there's a bolt there. And you can pretty much see that there's actually another one down lower, but you can pretty much see which one is in line with the ignition switch. It goes through the bottom of the switch. So that bolt there, if you take it out, it goes through the bottom of the switch, and this whole switch will just come out. So that should be enough. I'll stick an extension in there and a wobbler. I've got this wobbler extension here. These are really cool extensions. They have like a wobbler so the socket can wobble around a little bit. It's not a perfect square, it's kind of a weird wobbly shape, and it allows the socket to wobble around a little bit, almost like a universal, but not quite as much. So I should be able to reach in there, and I think it's an 8mm. Okay, I think it's going to be 8mm. Let's see if my eyeballs are right, or correct. Yeah, I think that's an 8mm. 5/16 SAE is the equivalent. You want to get straight on so you're not stripping it, or you want to get straight on the head of the bolt. Even with a wobbler, it's tricky. There we go. Bada bing, bada boom. I can get pretty much straight on it if I pull the signal switch out enough. This is going to be a weird bolt. You don't want to lose this one. This is a special bolt. So it has like a long pilot. I don't know how to explain it, but keep track of that. The threads are down here. And once you get that bolt out, this switch here should just pull right out in your hand. Just like that. There she is. My phone always rings when I'm trying to get something done. Every time. Go away! There! Now the ignition switch is out. Now, I can stick my key in here and find out if the key was the problem, or if the switch, see, the switch is further down, and this just runs a rod. So if the switch is locked up, this will still work with the key. But if the key doesn't still work in here, then it's the tumbler. Yeah. See, the key doesn't turn it. I've got the key here, and the key does not work in there. It's supposed to. This is the proper one, but get you out here in the daylight. That's what it looks like, the tumbler there. And the key is really worn, and the brass is all shaved. Like, I don't know if the ignition switch was, every time you stick the key in and out, if it's getting shaved down or what, but this is the tumbler, they call it. And this is just a mechanical device that runs a linkage rod, and the switch is further down on the rod. So this tumbler is all messed up. The key won't turn it. So I'll have to put a different tumbler or a new tumbler in. Hi there, buddy. Take your picture. I'll tell you a little secret. After you pull the tumbler out, you can reach in there with needle nose pliers or vice grips, and you can grab a hold of the eccentric, like a flat shaft, and you can turn it with the vice grips, or try not to mess it up, or don't put any burrs on the shaft, but you should be able to turn it after that. And if you want to turn the ignition on, you just grab it with the vice grips and turn it just like the key, and it should come alive. I don't recommend doing that unless you have to. In my case, I might need to temporarily if I need to work on the steering, or until I get a new tumbler. I don't have the new one yet, but I'll show you how it works. Frig sakes, I've got a little pair of needle nose pliers here. You have to recognize that there's some flat spots on the shaft in there, and you can turn it if you hold it the right way. You can turn the ignition on. I think the ignition's on. Yep. Ignition's on there now. And if you're careful, I don't know if I should do this or not, you can hit the starter. So you can turn it and hit the starter. You can put the steering wheel back on. You could technically start it. If you had a vehicle with no key, you could technically start it, put the steering wheel, make sure it's pressed on. But I'm really torn about if I should leave the steering wheel off or if I should disconnect the battery. I guess I don't need to disconnect the battery. If I can turn the four-way switch off here, maybe I'll just put it back in position for temporarily. If I can temporarily put this switch knob back on, then I can turn the four-ways off, because they're going to kill my battery. There. Okay. So that's how you remove your ignition tumbler. If you need to, you can still steer the vehicle. If I put the steering wheel back on, I can turn the ignition on. If you don't want the steering wheel to lock, you can just take that locking plate off, like I've already done. And there's a bunch of notches around the edge here. And when you turn the key off, there's a pin up here up at the top. And when you turn the key off, that pin comes out and it locks into that plate, into the notches. It just locks into one of those notches, and then your steering wheel won't turn. So if you have a new tumbler, you can just put it back in, put the bolt back in, put her all back together again, just like Humpty Dumpty. Or wait, no, not like Humpty Dumpty. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Maybe I should call this car Humpty Dumpty. Anyway, I was thinking about calling it Bird Box. I was torn between Bird Box and Miss Daisy because it used to belong to an old lady. Miss Daisy, Humpty Dumpty, Bird Box. So at least now I can run my ignition. I've got the key. Like, I've had the key for this car forever. So I don't know why it quit working, but you can tell the key is all worn down. I think the tumbler is messed up. So this will allow me to turn my steering wheel, line up my shaft, my steering shaft that I just installed today. If I want to run the engine, this will let me run the engine. And I'm going to order a new tumbler. I should have had it here by now. I should have ordered it by now, but I'm a slacker. So I'll just put the new one in there when it arrives, put the bolt back in, put it all back together again. No damage done, no harm done. Well, I put the steering wheel back on for now, and that's just going to allow me to turn the steering shaft. And if I need to move the vehicle at all, it hasn't moved since last fall, but that'll allow me to turn the shaft and put the bolts in and if I want to run the ignition in the meantime until the new ignition cylinder shows up. So yeah, I'll just leave it like that until while I can work on it until the new one shows up. So I've used a lot of junkyard parts and budget stuff, so I could put a junkyard tumbler in there if I could find one with a good key, good working one with a key. So I could use a junkyard part there. I've used a lot of junkyard parts on this project, but I guess they're only $20 for a new one with the key, so I'll probably order the new one. But this is something I wasn't expecting. Like, I know it's a project car, and the goal, like, I have a list of things to do on this project, and that ignition switch was never one of them. It always worked before, so I don't know why it just quit working. But you can tell by that key is really worn, and the brass is shaved, like, just from sticking it in and out of the ignition, I guess. I don't know. So I guess it's time for a new one. I put stickers on it yesterday. It was a little bit cold yesterday, and stickers don't like cold, but had no problem putting these vinyl decals on. These decals are actually pretty big compared to what I would normally do. I decided to put the big ones on, so they're kind of color matching. I used the red ones. Normally big, giant, loud stickers aren't my thing, but hey, gotta represent. Man, this looks like contraband. Mr. Mailman, bring me something awesome that I've never seen. Mr. Mailman, bring me something. Oh my goodness. Wow, those are wrapped up like bricks. New security cameras.